everyone. I hope all of you are doing great. Welcome to another fantastic episode of AI Prime Time. I'm your host, Ashok Samuel, and today I have invited a very important guest to our AI Prime Time, and he is Francisco. Hello, Francisco. Welcome to AI Prime Time.
Hey Ashok, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for
Absolutely.
inviting me. I think it will be
Thank you
a
very much for your presence.
my pleasure. I think it will be a very interesting conversation. I think it's like a merge of two topics that are very close to our hearts. For your side, machine learning. For my side, Azure Arc. And so let's try to combine it and let's see if it will be interesting both for us and also for the ones that are listening.
Thanks for spoiling this for our viewers. For the viewers, you must be thinking like, what exactly Ashok, a machine learning guy, is doing with Francisco, who is an infrastructure expert working in Microsoft Switzerland, right? So what exactly is the topic for today, where the one guy is AI machine learning guy and another is infrastructure guy? Well, that's the topic for today. It's been quite some time. I'm working with different partners and customers who are constantly asking us questions. Azure machine learning is fantastic. We are running n number of projects in the cloud, but there are some limitations. We have customers who can't move their data to the cloud, or because of n number of different region, they can't bring their data to the cloud, or they can't develop the model in the cloud, or they can't run their inferencing on the cloud, right? So what are the options Azure machine learning got if one of our customer is not interested to do the fantastic AI things in cloud, right? And it's been quite some time. We are trying to do different ways to solve this challenge, and it seems like finally Microsoft has found out the best way to do this, and that's the reason why Francisco is here. And instead of wasting much time, I will direct this question to Francisco. So Francisco, please enlighten us. What are the options we got if we don't want to go to cloud and still want to use the fantastic, machine learning, Azure machine learning, which is already Microsoft is having from last 4 to 5 years?
Okay, $1 million question. Um, yeah, so as you mentioned, clouds is definitely the preferred option. So because of several reasons, like its power, its flexibility, its scalability, and because in reality, if you look at the last few years, um, machine learning had a huge boost with the cloud adoption, right? Because it's much easier right now for everyone, every company, every organization to have access to a huge computing power instance to train their models, for example. But as you mentioned, it's not the only way to run learning models. And replying directly to your question, so what are the options that we have as of today? One derivation that we have from the cloud option is what we call the multi-cloud, which is getting a lot of traction lately for several reasons. We have some people that say that multi-cloud happens only by accident. So that can be one of the options, like if there was like a merge between two companies, or if there is just a cloud provider, let's call it sprawl within an organization. That can happen, that's true. But it's also a strategy for several customers, right? Some of them don't want to place all the eggs in the same basket. They want to spread them across, in this case, different cloud providers. But that means as well that they need to have multiple tools, multiple services, multiple processes to generate those models, because each cloud provider has its own services and its own specs and features, let's say that. So that's the first one. The second one is running at the edge, right? So running locally where closer to the users, where the data is being generated, and let's call it almost in real time. And that is being widely used as well, both on inference, especially on inference, but also for training purposes as well. Last but not least, it's the typical on-prem environment, right? We still have some customers that, for several reasons, they can't or they don't want to adopt a cloud strategy, and they still prefer or have to have the data locally, so they cannot ingest the data to the cloud. And so that's where the machine learning running at on-prem or at the data center is also an option as well. Luckily, for the three options, we have Azure Arc, right?
So if I understand you correctly, so the first one you explained is basically the multi-cloud options, yeah, and the second one that you said is the machine learning on edge devices, and the third one is on-prem by using the Azure Arc. Of course, the first option, the multi-cloud, you are still in the cloud, so it doesn't answer my question in reality. Like, think about companies who are prohibited to take their data to the cloud. So there is no question of the multi-cloud here. The second question, the second option that you gave me is edge computing. It sounds good, but it doesn't have much capability, honestly, because ACE has a limitations, how much data you can train and store and process, those are some of the limitations. Of course, that could be a use case for different kind of story, but the Azure Arc, the on-prem one, sounds really interesting. Can you explain what exactly is Azure Arc and what exactly machine learning has to do with it, and how our viewers can take the benefit of a combined machine learning, which is in cloud, like Azure Machine Learning plus Azure Arc, still fulfill their on-prem requirements or fulfill their regulatory requirements?
Yeah, so definitely, I agree with you. So from the three options, Azure Arc covers all of them, but the most interesting one is definitely on-premise, where you have most use cases, let's say. Why is that interesting? And yeah, probably let's just look at the big picture first, and then we jump to the machine learning part of it. So we can have a look at, or we can see Azure Arc in two different ways. The first one is Azure Arc as a connector, and the second one is as an enabler. And as a connector, it basically allows you to connect, right, to multiple servers, multiple clusters, Kubernetes clusters, for example, multiple virtual machines, regardless where they are. It can be in on-prem, at the cloud, at the edge, as I said, it doesn't matter. And so once you connect those with Azure Arc, you will be able to use the Azure platform as the single pane of glass to manage everything. So you have a kind of unified operations approach to all your environments, which is typically an heterogeneous environment. That's the first view of Azure Arc. The second one is the Azure Arc as an enabler. That means that you can bring Azure services outside Azure. And so that means that you can bring innovation as well outside the data center walls. Okay, we can call it that way. One example is Azure App Services, Azure Data Services, as for example SQL Managed Instance, or as the one we are talking here, Azure Machine Learning. So you can bring Azure Machine Learning to on-prem, other clouds as well, or at the edge. What makes it very interesting, especially for the machine learning part, but also for let's say in the enabler part of Azure Arc, is that when the customers already have knowledge around the technology, let's just focus right now on machine learning, for example. If we have a team that is very experienced, have all the process already well known, and have resources to use Azure Machine Learning, for example, they can use the same concepts, the same knowledge for other environments as on-prem or their own data center, for example. So they have a consistent experience regardless where, let's say, the compute instance of Azure Machine Learning are running, if it is on Azure or outside Azure. And I can give you just an example. If a data scientist is using, for example, Azure Machine Learning Studio with a notebook, for example, the only thing they need to change is really pointing up to a new target, to a new compute target. Everything else is exactly the same as they were training or generating those models in the cloud. So that's the first thing that I think it's really interesting. The second point is that it opens the door to several customers that for some reason they can't migrate their data to the cloud, or they cannot migrate their data to the cloud, right? So since they cannot ingest data in the cloud, we are doing the opposite. So we are bringing a cloud service, in this case Azure Machine Learning, to where their data is, which is typically in their own data center.
That is really fantastic. So you mean to say that as the customer is not able to move their data to Azure or cloud or whatever it is, that's the reason, or that is a problem, or that is a limitation, I would say, in 2021.
Yeah.
And we have a perfect option that we are bringing our fantastic tools, mechanism, methodologies back to their data centers so that they can use the power of
Yeah.
this fantastic Azure machine learning, right? I want to make a couple of things very, very clear here, and I need your please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. First, you were saying that the Azure Machine Learning, the Studio, the Notebook, everything that we have in cloud, in Azure Cloud, is the same look and feel when we go for this option, Azure Machine Learning with Arc. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Perfect. And then the customer is having the data on-prem in their data centers, and they don't need to transfer their data to the Azure Cloud. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, that's absolutely right as well.
Wow, that's great. That's really great. And then instead of having a compute engine on Azure Cloud, like the Kubernetes cluster, the virtual machine, instead of having it in the cloud, is basically a Kubernetes cluster on the customer data center. It has nothing to do with Microsoft Azure or cloud in this context, right?
Yeah, that's it. So exactly. So they don't need to have a cloud instance. They just point to an instance which is not on the cloud. In this case, can be in a data center, at the edge, or in other clouds. Yes.
That is perfect. That is perfect. So you are in total control of your data. You are telling where exactly your models should be trained and deployed because it's your data center, but you are still able to use the fantastic Azure machine learning tool and do your experiments, register your models, use the SDKs and all this stuff on the that is basically people are using on the Azure cloud. That's really great. That's really a great enabler, I would say. Now, it boils down to my next question. What are the stuff that our partners and customers should do in order to get this facility? Like, do they need to enable something? Do they need to do some magic with their infrastructure? What exactly they need to do, and how difficult it is for them to do that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what we are doing is that we are leveraging, as you mentioned before, the Kubernetes platform. So we can have a look at Kubernetes as it was like a standard platform where we can run our services everywhere, because all the Kubernetes platform, at least the core components of it, are exactly the same everywhere. Of course, each provider adds here and there extra features. So the first requirement is really to have a Kubernetes cluster and to connect this cluster to Azure Arc. Okay, so that first view that I told before about Azure Arc, we need to connect this cluster to Azure Arc in order to be seen from the Azure point of view. And then after that, what we need to do, or the customers need to do, is to install the Azure Arc enabled machine learning extension, which represents a couple of containers, a couple of services that we need in order for Azure machine learning to work successfully. After those two steps, what the customer needs to do is basically to, as I mentioned before, create a new compute target, and that's it. So after that, you'll be able to use it as it was a normal compute target running in your cloud, for example.
All right. So that doesn't look very difficult. I mean, the
Yeah.
people who are doing this infrastructure management as well as the machine learning operation part of the story, they know how to do this stuff. So that doesn't look very difficult to do. And does it comes with any extra cost or something? Or what exactly are the cost implications? Is there a huge cost difference that our customers and partners should be aware of in this case?
Yeah. Very good question as well. So today, what we have a public preview okay, for training with Azure Arc Machine Learning, and that one is free, so it doesn't have any cost as of today. Of course, when we launch it publicly in GA, it will have a cost, but we don't have yet information about what will be that cost. And the same for inference. Right? For now, inference it's not yet publicly available. We have a private preview limited to a few customers, but I think the pricing will be kind of the same for both of them, although we don't have yet that information.
Yeah, important point taken, guys. Just to let you know, this is still in public preview and it's not GA, so it will be GA, sometime in near future. And really need to, put a couple of instances, connect their data scientists, and start exploring. And I'm very much confident that this will unlock a lot of potential in coming future. So a question to you guys, the audience, do you guys feel this is an interesting one to explore further? If we get enough requests from you all, then what we can do, Francisco and me, we can jump into a live hands-on session where we will be doing it from end to end, creating the Azure Arc, creating the machine learning, running a machine learning model, connecting it to the Azure Arc, and do all the magics and then do the predictions out, right? We will do it online, live in front of you guys so that you guys can see what are the steps needed to complete to do this end-to-end journey. So let us know, let us ping down here so that we can set up a next time if we get enough interested participant to follow us in our live session. So that's all for today. Thank you very much, Francisco, for enlightening us. How can we combine on-prem with machine learning and still do the magic and use the powerful Azure machine learning tool? Thank you very much, Francisco. And thank you all of you, and see you next time with another fantastic episode in AI Prime Time.